It's a great image.
Well, Louise, what do you think? Should we give it a time or should we start?
I suspect that some people connected via the YouTube live stream, so we can probably start, and the link will be available afterwards anyway. So
right. All right.
Okay.
Well, let me see. All right. Well, listen, it's great to see you all. Hi. Thank you so much for coming. I'm David Gersten. I'm the Director of Arts, Letters, and Numbers. And I want to welcome you all to this really wonderful event. This is, we're holding this in collaboration with the Design Center at UQAM in Montreal, Canada. And I want to really thank my dear friend Louise Pelletier, the Director of the Design Center, for bringing such an important discussion to our exhibition in the 17th Venice Architecture Biennale. So, ECRAN total screen. This is our first panel discussion that we are hosting as part of the programming within the Biennale. And we have many more programs coming over the next weeks and months. But I have to say that I am very moved that we are beginning here with this program tonight. And I say that for a few reasons. First, for the sort of immediate and very present condition of the total screen states that we have all been living, and, you know, in some ways for many decades. And of course, in other ways, these screen states have really been heightened in the recent year. And I believe that the questions that the exhibition raises, and I'm sure the panel will be engaging tonight, are crucial to our understanding and imagination, in fact, of our screens, of our broken screens, and our broken society. So I also want to share that since the time I was a young student and teacher at the Cooper Union, the work of Jean Baudrillard has had a profound impact on my thinking and on that of many in my generation. And it continues to, I mean, in many ways, its impact, in fact, increases with each year. So I believe it is extremely important that we engage this work and questions in a creative way and in a present tense ways, which the exhibition at the Design Center and in fact the event this evening are clearly doing that. And finally, I want to say that I'm very moved that we begin this Venice Biennale project in collaboration with Louise Pelletier and the Design Center. Louise has been a dear friend for many years. And I would also have to say that for decades, she has been a force, both creating and transforming the discourses of architecture. Louise's depth of intellect, her precision, and ultimately her generosity of spirit has always been an inspiration. And her contributions to the debates and cultures of architecture have been enormous. So I can think of no one that I would rather begin this journey with. And so thank you, Louise. Welcome to all. And I really look forward to continuing to learn from you this evening. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you so much, David. It's very touching. I'm extremely grateful for your very kind words. I'm also very grateful. Well, I've always admired your work, and I've seen the project of ALN evolve over the years, and it has taken a tremendous importance and place in this kind of experimentation and exploring the limit of what architecture work can be. And I'm extremely grateful to you for this invitation to join this discussion and join this grand project of being part of this virtual pavilion for the Biennale. So an enormous thank you for allowing us to be part of it. I would like to start, well, first by acknowledging that the lands on which the UQAM Design Center is located are part of an ancestral territory that has long served as a place of life, meeting, and exchanges between indigenous people, in particular, the nation Ganyon-Gehaga Mohawk. We recognize that these nations have never ceded their rights or sovereign authority over the lands and water upon which the exhibition that we will discuss tonight was produced. What is interesting to me in being part of this event is also related to the very topic of this year Venice Architecture Biennale. In fact, the topic for the Biennale is togetherness. It's a central theme, and yet the manner in which we interact with each other is unquestionably the aspect of our life that has been most dramatically and directly impacted by the current situation that has impacted the last 15 months. In the design of an exhibition, in particular, this longing for real presence has been exacerbated by the imposed isolation that plagues us still today. On the one hand, various forms of mediation through the omnipresence of screen that David was obviously referring to, have allowed people from all over the world to gather in different places, but at a shared moment in time. And this is precisely what allows us tonight to bring together people from Montreal, from Averill Park, from New York City, Venice, from all over the world. And it's in fact a direct result of this unusual situation that has been created by the pandemic. As designer, artist, but also as architect, such shifting condition must be engaged. And this is precisely what we try to do with this exhibition, Total Screen. The modes of interaction that demand that we look through screens of all sorts in order to truly see each other. And I'm very much looking forward to the talk with Penelope Umbrico today, because this is precisely one of the issues that she addresses through her work in a very magistral way. The exhibition that was produced at the UQAM Design Center addresses these issues of the omnipresence of screen, and as David mentioned, it draws from Jean Baudrillard's seminal work, his text Écran Total, which was translated as Screened Out in English, first published in 1997. That became really the source, the inspiration, and the guiding line for the Total Screen exhibition at the Design Center that presents the work of 7 established and emerging artists, including Penelope, who is joining us tonight, but also the work of Adam Basenta, Charlie Doyon, Clint Enns, Mishka Henner, and Bassem Bhatti, as well as Juan Ji. The exhibition that we develop, and in a moment, my colleague Katharina Nemeyer will tell you more about it. The exhibition offers different forms of mediation, in fact, 3 distinct experiences of mediation that articulate critically this ideas of Baudrillard around the concept of the viral simulation, surveillance, implosion. I will invite Katarina to tell us more about how the whole project developed. This discussion will be followed by a presentation and a discussion around the work of Penelope Umbrico and my colleagues, two colleagues from the School of Design, Amandine Alessandra and Carole Lévesque. I take the opportunity to remind you that if some of you have a question throughout the discussion tonight, and specifically when Penelope will be discussing her work, I would invite you to use the chat box to share your questions, and we'll be happy to relay them throughout the evening. So first, let me introduce my colleague, Katharina Nemeyer, who's a professor at UQAM in the School of Media. She's also the director of a very, very important research center, the Centre de Recherche Culturelle et Société de CELA. She was trained in cultural science and media archaeology and philosophy, as well as in communication science. Her work focuses on the relationship between media and digital technologies, temporalities, memory, and history. I'm very pleased to welcome Katarina to tell us more about how the whole exhibition, the whole idea of an exhibition around Baudrillard, his theory, and his practice as a photographer came about.
Thank you very much, Louise, for this introduction. And thank you very much. I'm speaking also in the name of Marine Baudrillard tonight, and also Magali Miül, who couldn't join us. She's also a co-curator. Thank you very much, David. We are arts, letters and numbers that we can be with you on this sunship together during the Biennale in Venice, even if it's virtually. So thank you very much for that. I will more or less read, because I'm not trained to speak English every day, and will also share my screen if you don't mind. So I will start by sharing my screen for the presentation. And if everything is, Zoom is like it was when we tested it, you should see very quickly a total screen. Does it work? Okay, wonderful. So before talking about Jean Baudrillard's philosophy and photography, I wish to remind some key elements of his life, but also thank Marine Baudrillard, who herself is a professional photographer, who gave us access to original archive material of her husband, and who supported the whole adventure from far away as a co-curator of the exhibition. Jean Baudrillard, a thinker, provocateur, and philosopher of hyperreality and simulation, taught sociology in France at the universities of Nanterre and Dauphine until 1968. Apart from his visionary lucidity, he was also a photographer, often capturing images with a disposable camera. Some of his photographic work has been exhibited in Sydney at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Australia in 1994, La Maison Européenne de la Photographie in France in 2001, à Kassel in the Kunsthalle Fridericianum, Germany in 2004, Los Angeles, Le Chateau Sato in 2017, and also in Shanghai at the Power Station of Art in China in 2019, and now in Montreal. In his own words, Jean Baudrillard encapsulates his trajectory as follows. And they show some pictures that has never been shared by archive pictures from Marine Baudrillard of her husband. He talked about himself as being a pataphysician at 20, situationist at 30, utopian at 40, transversal at 50, viral and metaleptic at 60, the whole of my history. Among his many works are The Consumer Society, Myth and Structures, Symbolic Exchange and Death, Cool Memories, as well as Écran Total, or Screened Out, translated into English from 1996, a collection of essays, which is the subject of this exhibition, as Louise already reminded us earlier. So, from viral implosions to deserts of the real. This is a guiding line since the beginning of the total screen adventure, which has started in 2018. Bringing Jean Baudrillard's photographs the first time to Canada was Magali Hull's idea while we were walking to our university offices. Walking brings ideas sometimes. So as I knew Marine Baudrillard for a longer time already, and as I was a member of the Cool Memory Association in Paris, the idea has not just stayed an idea, as you can see today via your screens. Initially, the total screen exhibition intended already to exhibit Baudrillard's photographic work and philosophy in dialogue with contemporary artists, aiming to critically engage with our relations to screens in a world that has already been characterized before the pandemic by different types of ecological and social emergencies, as well as by an overwhelming presence of digital technologies and social media platforms in our everyday lives. The materiality of media, in a large sense, in relation to current emergencies is more relevant than ever, but this point of departure for the total screen exhibition has been almost completely overrun by the pandemic situation. At the same time, the latter ironically captures and implodes in a nutshell the main concept Jean Baudrillard already pointed out decades ago in his visionary texts, mainly in the 60s and 70s. That the near future will be characterized by simulation, virality, implosion, and surveillance, the loss of signs and significations in the growing production of artificial meanings, and the subsequent longing for something else. The French philosopher, who passed away in 2007, used to be a melancholic optimist, believing in the return of singularity. Without ever falling into a dualistic approach of what reality could have been, or might be, or will never be. In this sense, his ideas may offer a link between media as materials of simulation and as materials of retaining hope for a singular real. I think Penelope Umbrico's work is also a testimony for that. Baudrillard turned his own writings into a seductive simulation machine that still plays with our conceptions of reality. This is a proposition one can accept and flow with, refuse from the outset, or oscillate undecidedly between approval and disapproval. As co-curators, we find ourselves somewhere in between, oscillating between our desire to push the simulation machine even further and our inclination to interrogate what place Jean Baudrillard occupies today, or our place too, but this is another question. Provocative, eclectic, ironic, playful, and anticipatory, Baudrillard thinking propels both the image and the medium of photography, and that which evades them into a dimension that inspires, questions, amazes, and disturbs. 30 years after 1991, when he argued that the Gulf War has never happened, in an attempt to demonstrate the extent to which the society of the image has deviated from an already vanished reality, and 20 years after 9/11, when he referred to the destructions of the Twin Towers in 2001 on live television as a symbiotic apex between experience and its image. His conception of the image, of its forms, and of its plasticity remain resolutely contemporary, which is also reminded by the work from Wasim Bati and Mishke Henner, by the way, you will discover later. More powerful than its own presence in a reality that it renders less real and confined to endless media feedback, the image has become an event, and the event an image. The philosopher's writings certainly illustrate the force of his visionary view of society that followed his death in 2007, and whose vision has nevertheless encompassed the dominance of simulacra, transparency, and hyperreality, the injunction of computer code, the virality of communications, and the implementation of artificial intelligence, each of which are profound present-day issues that permeate his work from beginning to end. If Baudrillard's philosophy was supposed to be irrelevant after his death in 2007, it nevertheless persists and resurfaces in the criticism of our present time, especially with regard to the supremacy of images in a society that has become a total screen. I just take a bit water from the sea just behind, next to the boat. It would be equally inadequate to ignore COVID-19 in light of Baudrillard's systematic and sometimes debatable reflections on virality and its relationship to disaster and chaos. In fact, he perceived the individual as, and I quote Baudrillard, the chosen terrain for viruses and viral diseases, just as computers become the chosen terrain for electronic viruses. For viruses resist and proliferate as soon as they have free space. Total Screen, 1969. Moreover, it is crucial to take a critical look at the screen, which since the early spring of 2020 has become our almost only communicative interface with the world. National and international news, shopping, domestic and social, as well as cultural activities, sports and online games, as well as the consumption of fiction and various platforms, to name a few examples. This is especially relevant considering that we invest our professional, private, and social lives in the screen, including our most intimate moments, but also our creative moments and artwork. The sunship today we are all on, which is gathering, this event is only one example. And Total Screen is also invested in material and virtual arcs, an arc between Baudrillard's photographic work, his philosophy, and the artworks of the exhibition. And I will now present the part of Magali, who couldn't join us today. So I can't imitate her voice, but just imagine that Magali is talking at my place. So as I just said, Baudrillard is considered as a visionary. He offered a sharp analysis of the relationship between image and reality, even more relevant in the current pandemic context where the screen interface is overwhelming. At a time when the explosive evolution of our visual practices relies the transformation of our relationship to images, the Total Screen exhibition explores the screen as an interface, as we already said, about simulation, surveillance, occlusion, and virality. As this concept developed by Baudrillard are embodied in his own photographic practice that is firmly anchored in his time before the advent of Web 2.0, the exhibition proposes to update these main motives, themes, and approaches critically in the face of contemporary technologies and uncertainties. The philosopher's photographic snapshots share the stage and the screens with the installations of 4 invited international artists. Louise already named them, Amandine will talk about them, so I don't want to take so much space, so I won't re-quote them. But all of them, critically and reflectively, expand on and rethink the philosopher's observations and intuitions for the digital age and its exponential multiplication of images as well as their virality. Through photographs, projections, and installations, the Total Screen exhibition features 3 distinct experiences of mediation. The first one is a very real physical exhibition at the Centre de Design, which are installations where the installations seem to wait in quiet contemplation alongside the images of Jean Baudrillard and flanked by his aphorisms. As you can see at the entrance point, the artworks, descriptions, and credits are aligned together on different screens, so the visitor is invited to walk forth and back as in a hypertext on the web, or to say it with Baudrillard's words. There is no separation any longer, no empty space, no absence. You enter the screen and the visual image unhindered. You enter your life as you would walk onto a screen. You slip on your own life like a data suit. 1996, screened out. Amandine Alessandra will detail the artworks later, so just take a quiet look at the following pictures of this first mediation. We can share more later in the chat with the link. I will share them, but I have too many screens open, so I don't want to interrupt the presentation that works so far technically. The second mediation is an outdoor installation at the Centre de Design, where the exhibit pieces are revealed in all their hyperreality, except exacerbating their absent presence by proxy. I'll just have you a quick look too, and then we'll go to the website. And I'm almost done also. The third mediation, I will open here. Oops. Can you all see this well? Just let me know at some point if there's a problem to see the website. The third experience is that of the reimagined exhibition, progressively and partially remediated online, and accessible from a distance within a totally fabricated dimension, that of the total screen that surrounds us today. So you can see adjectives in form of short videos for each artist. You can discover it. I will share the link later too, or if someone else is motivated to do it right now, you can do this. So, like the total screen exhibition, the question in the Biennale 2021's title, How We Will Live Together, came well before the pandemic and can be seen as prophetic too. Across its staging, Total Screen deploys the dramatic side of this question, but with astonishing proposals of the artists, also explores its imaginative potential for the times to come. I will now pass the word to Louise and Amandine again. I think Louise wanted to introduce Amandine for really digging deeper into the work of the artist. So thank you very much, and sorry for having read my text.
Thank you so much, Katharina. It's a very good introduction to the work of Baudrillard, of course, but also to some of the underlying issues to the work of our guest tonight, Penelope. But first, I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues who will be discussing with her. First, well, two of the co-curators who have been very involved, and I'm very grateful to them. As for Katharina and Magali, Amandine and Carole have been very involved in the design and the production of the exhibition at the Design Center, two colleagues from the School of Design. So first, Amandine is a new colleague, recently hired at school. She's a photographer, a designer, and a professor. Her research explores the body as an interface in a process of mediation of the message, as well as the way in which digital tools function as spatial and temporal extension of the here and now. Carole Lévesque, who's also a professor at the School of Design, is a co-founder of the Bureau of the Study of Undisciplined Practices, BP, and she's also a research member of the CILAT, for which Katharina is the director. Her work explores questions that pertains to the margins, deviation, and hybrid methods. She's also an amazing artist. Also, she draws beautifully, and we've had the chance of having her work exhibited at the Design Center. So I will let them engage in conversation with Penelope Umbrico.
Thanks, Louise. First, I'm going to introduce you to everyone to the work that has been shown in the exhibition. But before that, thank you very much, David Gersten and Louise Pelletier. It's not only an honor, but it also seems incredibly meaningful for the show Écran Total to be mediated through the virtual Italian pavilion, as I will now comment on pieces that are artists' reflection on how we show and see the world through our screens, while using everyday virality to broadcast my screen here in Montreal onto your screen, probably elsewhere, in multiple places in the world. I'm just going to share my screen, so it's a bit fiddly. Okay. So it's with great pleasure and excitement that I will now introduce you to the work of the 7 artists whose pieces revisit Jean Baudrillard's critical thinking on screens and the simulation of realities that not only make possible, but also offer infinite echo for through virality. We will start with the work of Charlie Doyon, who is an artist based in Montreal. Her series, Abstract Bodies, takes the form of photographic portraits of solitary human figures whose identities seem fragmented by domestic screens like TVs and computers and tablets and phones. This series of photographic prints is extended by a performance that took place in the Centre de Design ahead of the show, and which you can now see on your screens, ironically. This work highlights the constant shift between virtuality and materiality that we have been experiencing in the past few years, and even more so since March 2020. So by materializing the constant back and forth between physical presence and screen mediation, these tangible argentic photographs and this screen-based performance echoes our fragmented selves. We'll just relaunch it. So our fragmented selves were like torn between domestic screen technology and human physicality, and it reflects our current pandemic experience. In his book Écran Total, published in 1996, so quite like 2 decades before the advent of life on screen as we know it, Jean Baudrillard talked about sleeping on your own life like a data suit. And screens are no longer just an extension of us. They channel the vast majority of our daily experiences and interaction, as it is the case right now, as I'm talking to you. Our identity is scattered amongst different platforms, and we don't expose the same self on LinkedIn, Tinder, Instagram, or in work Zooms. So the half human and half machine cyborgs that Doyon creates in her work sets a dystopian vision of the discrepancy between screen technologies and the reality of the human body in its tangible singularity. So this work literally embodies the impact of virtual mediation tools on social relationship and self-perception. With this enigmatic performed portrait, like a screen-based Archimboldo allegoric portrait, Charlie Doyon depicts how screens have long started shaping our way of thinking, acting, and presenting our distracted and diffracted selves. And while Doyon explores how screens shape our way of being, Chouanier, who I'm going to introduce now, explores how, in an era of digital networks, the viral nature of images alters our way of seeing, but equally our approach to creating links between data. With their series Deep Aware Triad, Vivir, 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 which is a pun on vivir, Spanish for to live, and a stammer version of the word virus, Chouanier aims at visually translating complex systems related to big data. In this triad, Chouanier applies neural network-based learning methods to image editing. They deliberately misuse the sensitive filling function of an AI digital brush to merge images from a photographic database constituted of illustration from academic articles about Jean Baudrillard and picture libraries. This diverted tool is associated with other algorithms to create transitional textures content between the found photograph until they take the form of free aggregate composites. The result takes the form of digital paintings or collages built on diagrams inspired by the architecture of artificial neural networks. The final proposal simulates viral systems, and this work is a continuation of Chouanier's media poetry in their quest for a transitional visual language between the coded and the living, using metaphors from the field of biology, computer science, and linguistics. Clint Hens, too, explores the notion of virality of online images with his work challenging ethical limits of sharing, possibly oversharing, but also resharing personal images on open source platforms. As you probably know, open source content, such as images, is released under a license in which the copyright holder grants users the right to use, study, change, and distribute content to anyone and for any purpose. This piece by Clint Hens consists in a 360 time-stamped photographs, each marking a day when the internet entered what we call Web 2.0 era. That year also marked the birth of Flickr, one of the only photo archives from that time that is still readily searchable today. So there on Flickr, Clean Hands gathered his collection of vernacular digital photographs by rummaging through online photographic collections of users who hadn't posted in years. He then assembled them as an eclectic but strictly chronological series. So if you see them in the exhibition, they are all shown together, pretty much like a calendar. So each image stands for a day of the year 2004. So the individual images themselves take us back to the beginnings of participative content in the digital age, a decade before the advent of smartphones. These make us realize how forgiving are our smartphones in their auto-balance capture of sleek post-production of everyday pictures compared to pocket digital cameras back then with their crude flash and oversaturated colors. Carrying a camera around was still a thing then. However, we must remember that until platforms such as Flickr appeared, sharing images mainly happened via email and remained a rather private practice kept within close friends and family. By the excavation and the curation of these digital archaeology artifacts, hence unearths the social memory of screen images produced and shared by the amateur photographers who participated in the evolution of the internet and in the birth of the digital social photography as we know it. Also reusing images gleaned on social media platforms and equally questioning the voyeur approach of one-way unsuspected. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to cut the sound. The sound usually on this piece. So Mishkaino and Vasim Bhatti also reuse found images from social platforms. And they devised this installation for Écran Total. This piece is called Energy Ghost, and it is a video installation projected in a circular shape, displaying hundreds of sequences of natural disasters that were filmed by surveillance systems, live webcams, or by witnesses' phone and shared on the social digital networks where Henna and Bhatti gleaned them. So by confronting the ubiquity of cameras that captures and screens that broadcast, Henna and Bhatti questioned the cognitive impact of this constant confrontation to catastrophic situations. These scenes of destruction trick us into an irresistible seduction that is very difficult to evade, revealing a sinister human fascination for utter devastation. The actual piece is about half an hour long, and there's sound and music, and it's actually very hypnotic. Often recorded by chance at the very moment these catastrophes were triggered, these sequences make us realize that nothing anymore escapes the panoptic gaze of the camera, nor the remediation by screen, since experience through image is now our way of apprehending the world. This is where we touch to the notion of surveillance as approached by Baudrillard. In this vision of the world presented to us, and not represented, but really presented through live webcams, for example, everything must be seen and known. There is no event too isolated to be spared from capture and dissemination on a large scale, while reducing other events that escape media coverage to silence and obliviousness, as Baudrillard pointed out in his famous and provocative essay, The Gulf War Didn't Take Place, pointing that media representation was limited to humanless propaganda images shot not by photographers, but rather by unmanned cameras attached to planes and laser-guided bombs. Adam Basanta also explores the notion of humanless photography by using a mix of programmed randomness in the making of artworks and artificial intelligence in its validation by the art world. So this piece is called All We'd Ever Need Is One Another. It is a mixed media installation that creates images autonomously. It's a continuous running art factory with lots of quote marks, operating independently of human input. So you can see, you could see just now, there's a light, a flashing light that triggers 3 flatbed scanners laying on their side into scanning surfaces pointing at each other. A computer script creates automatic mouse movements, randomizing the settings of the scanning software interface and beginning a scanning process with random color balance, contrast, crop, and so on. So you will see the scan a bit better now. So each newly created images is then analyzed by deep learning algorithms that were trained on a database of contemporary artworks in economic and institutional circulation. So when an image matches an existing artwork beyond a similitude of 83%, it is validated as art and uploaded to a dedicated website, Twitter and Instagram account. And occasionally, high-ranking matches are printed live at the gallery using a large format printer. So playing on notions of technological automatization, the agency of object, cultural consumption, and the economics of artistic production, Basanta's installation acts as a self-sufficient mechanism, continuously and mindlessly self-producing without regard for human spectators, but still seeking validation of the art world. So presenting a central feature of his artistic approach, the work highlights a certain cultural and economic determinism, passing it to the magnifying mirror of algorithms and automation. Quite fascinatingly, we discovered during our opening conversation panel that long before we even started working on Écran Total, Basanta's database of contemporary artwork included a piece by Penelope Umbrico, which for us sealed the perfect loop between these two artists presented in the show. So Adam Basanta and Penelope Umbrico, who had never met until the show, had a lot in common in terms of exploring screens, both for their physicality as tools of approximative remediation of images, reinterpreted by the cold LED backlight of LCD screens. So this piece of Penelope Umbrico, which I'm going to introduce now, was created especially for Écran Total. It belongs to a larger body of work called Art of Order. In her own way, Penelope Umbrico deconstructs our relationship to screens by dismantling the smooth surface that we stare at all day, from the minute we wake up to the moment we drift into sleep. So Out of Order eBay is a multimedia installation confronting us to the materiality of the screen. So here, the solid interface between the here of our physical position and the there of information, that surface that we are staring at so much and that you are staring at right now, but that we never actually look at for what it is, stands deployed in all its physicality. So in this piece, we have sandwich layers of a liquid crystal display, LCD, so an LCD screen, that has been dismantled and suspended as if in a standstill in the midst of implosion or explosion rather. Behind these translucent lenticular surfaces, a functional TV set broadcasts a video made from images and colorful graphic displays, cropped from screenshots of faulty TV sets found for sale for their parts on eBay. So by deconstructing our relationship to the physicality of these glass gateways to the outside world, Umbrico seems to question our dependence on a technology subjected to planned obsolescence to satisfy a capitalist logic of consumers' culture. So I will now pass on to Penelope Umbrico, who will tell us more about how she explores the materiality of screens in her celebrated practice.
Thank you so much, Amandine, and to everybody, all the curators and David. I'm going to stand up because there's something going on with my window and light, so I'm not in the shadow. I just, you're all so articulate about this work, so much more so than I am. So I hope I can live up to how you guys speak about it. Should I share my screen? Get my keynote there. Okay. Did you give me permission to share screen? Yeah, okay. So Is this working? Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, great. So the other thing that I want to thank you, I've already thanked you for, but I will thank you again, was just to the sort of a prompt to go back and reread some of the Baudrillard that I had read 30 years ago. And I actually just realized as you were talking that I should have taken a photograph of this particular quote, because in this book that I've had for, I don't know, 25, 30 years, I underlined this particular section, the enigma of the carcass. It's from Simulacra Simulation, so not from Total Screen, but I'll read it. The enigma of the carcass, of flux and signs, of networks and circuits, the final impulse to translate a structure that no longer has a name, the structure of social relations given over to an irreversibly deep implosion. Monument to the games of mass simulation, functions as an incinerator, absorbing all the cultural energy and devouring it. A bit like a black monolith in 2001. Insane convection of all the contents that came there to be materialized, to be absorbed, and to be annihilated. So he's talking about the Pompidou Center there, but for me, I realized how much of an influence this was, because I've always thought of this as being about the screen, about the television. So I, quite a few years after I had read that, I started collecting images of TVs on Craigslist because of this very feeling of the absorption that happens in them, and interested in just the idea of exchange. So these are all televisions for sale on Craigslist. If you don't know what Craigslist is, it's sort of the same as Gumtree in Europe. I just became really fascinated by the presence of figures in the images, and how this idea of the implosion in this object of a life could be sort of played out. And at the same time that I was collecting these images from Craigslist of TVs, I was also, well, these are the cropped images of them. So I took just the screens from them and cropped them, and then this is a digital mock-up of a lot of them. And at the same time as I was doing this work, I was also working on Flickr, thinking about what it means to share the same kind of photograph. And this idea of, from the paragraph that I read to you, also really applied to me, to photography in general. So I was thinking about photography in this way. And what was really striking to me here is that these photographs of people, this is so big on this screen, and it's kind of pixelated. I mean, they're pixelated images, but it's also not that clear. I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, well, these images of people who are sharing their photographs on Flickr of themselves at sunset are disappearing. The technology of the camera is exposing to the sun, and that technology then erases the individual. And I like to show them together, these two projects, actually. So this is an installation that I had on a wall that was built specifically for the work. On one side were these, can you see my mouse? Okay, good. On this side was suns from sunsets from Flickr. And on this side were all the TVs from Craigslist. And why I like to show them together is that on this side, in the suns from sunsets from Flickr, all of these people really care about these photographs. So there's this kind of assertion of presence in front of the camera and in front of the sunset, and an insistence on being there, like a proof that I was there, and yet everybody's disappearing. But they're meaningful to the individuals who are taking them, otherwise they wouldn't be sharing them. So there's a kind of love of these photographs, or a sense of subjectivity in these photographs for the individuals, but seen collectively, they really do all kind of disappear. And then in these photographs, the TVs from Craigslist, these are throwaway photographs. They're only meant to sell a TV. They don't care about the photographs at all. And yet it's in these photographs, that's not a good sign, that you actually see the individual. And you see the subjectivity of the individual. And often you see very intimate, very, very intimate images reflected in the TVs. And one of the things that I think is kind of fascinating is in an image file that's this big on Craigslist, you're not very aware of what is actually being reflected in the TV. At least the people in these photographs weren't that aware of what was. So the screen in this case is actually kind of ignored. It's the object that is being sold. And one of the things that I've been thinking about at that time was, and I still think about, a lot of my work is driven by this idea. And this is where the work that I made for ECRAN Total develops directly out of this work. Thinking about the materiality of the screen and how we are not aware of its materiality until it breaks. So we're all looking at a screen right now. You're not thinking about looking at a screen. You're looking at the images I'm showing you. You're looking at each other. But you don't have a sense of the physical materiality that makes up the screen. So I started collecting these images. So these are files that I downloaded from eBay of TVs for sale. And I was at first really sort of, I wanted to sort of investigate this idea of the materiality, but I was really struck by the modernist, like some of them had this kind of very beautiful modernist abstraction. So I started just collecting those ones that I could just crop out. And here's an example of some of the earliest ones that I made. I realized that I was mapping on an aesthetic. Like I was interpreting these visual forms as modernist aesthetics, when really they're just liquid crystal gone wrong, right? This is an installation that I had a few years ago. And this was an installation at the Milwaukee Art Museum that they acquired, actually. And I liked putting it there because the Milwaukee Art Museum has this kind of very modernist, brutalist architecture. And all of these broken LCD TVs looks like the space that they were being presented in. A lot of the work that I've done around the screen also has to do with what's in front of the screen, what's in the screen, and then what's behind the screen. So, so the TVs from Craigslist are reflections of something that's in front of the screen. The broken sets are in the screen, the materiality of the screen being present. These are files that I downloaded from Craigslist of the TV that's actually emitting electronic signal, but not saying anything. And so this became a project called Signals Still, where I liked that there was a kind of sign, but a sign that we can't understand. That they felt like these TV screens felt like they were humming, and they had some kind of information, but the screen itself became like a sifter where it couldn't sift through the information that we could understand. And then the other part of this then is like what happens when the hand is in the screen. So these are all images of laptop and computer monitor screens where the seller has pointed out the flaw by way of some kind of image authoring software, like little arrows. And so in these images, the hand of the seller is actually being presenced in the screen. And then in these images, bodies are in the broken. So these are images where the television has been turned on and you can see bodies in the broken visuals of the LCD. I decided that I wanted to put my own hand in the screen. So I got this residency. This is at ECAL in Switzerland. And I decided I was going to print all of these and some of these on this Heidelberg press. And one of the things that I really wanted to investigate here was the Heidelberg press is like one of the most precise digital. This is a digital one. It's like so precise, and so is the screen. It's so precise, but they're also both really messy. So or they can be. So I decided to use only paper that they had left over. So I'm sort of recycling leftover paper. And then as the rollers were going, I was up in the machine putting ink in myself, so that all of the images, like this is one set of pages, they're all different because they all have this kind of hand added printing at like 125, 150% ink density. So this is the book that we made there. Sometimes there was so much ink it just completely covered the entire image. This is the same spread, just 4 different versions of it, so you can see how different each one was. And I really liked the kind of materiality and the sort of liquid messiness of both the printer and the screen in this case. These are some of the pieces that, unique prints that were outtakes from the book. And I realized, at some point that all of my work and everything that I've been doing was mostly in screen, and that like looking at a sunset on screen, you're not looking at sunlight, you're looking at screen light. So I actually made this video. Let's see, is it gonna play? I think my computer, it's doing something, it's not, okay, it's not gonna play. It's a video it's a video of a very slow dissolve between different suns and images that I found online. And then I re-recorded it with my iPhone on the screen. So the moire in the video allows the, well, sort of makes the sun sort of go in and out of the screen. Like sometimes it disappears and sometimes, but it's not going to play for us. So, oh, there we are. So the sun disappears and then reappears. Okay, we'll skip this. And the other thing I started to do was thinking, okay, well, if the sun is out there and the screen is here and it's emitting light, what does it look like inside the screen? Like, how can I reverse that relationship? Can I have the sunlight come through the screen rather than screen light through the sun? So I started to disassemble screens. So these are some screens that I disassembled. Here are some screens, very different screens. These are LCD TV screens. These are monitor screens. These are laptop screens. And I started UV printing on them the images of the broken screens. So this is a bunch of laptop screens that have printed on them broken screens. This is a big LCD TV that has its broken image printed on it, and another one. And with the monitor screens, I realized at some point, so I scanned them, and I wasn't really interested in these as scans, but what happened when I put them on my, so I had a scan of a screen on my computer monitor, and as I made it larger and larger, a moire pattern would happen between the the image of the screen and the screen it was on. So this is one image at different scales. It says 67%, but I'm just pulling the image up. So I decided that, and you know, I've always been fascinated by moire patterns. They're so beautiful, but in my mind, I have to have a kind of a better reason than just the beauty of something to make a project around it. And I realized at some point, oh, this is screen talking to screen. This is a language I do not understand, which is partly what makes it so mysterious and beautiful, but it's actually a communication between two screens. So here's what a lot of them looked like. I made this big installation in Switzerland of, I forget how many were in this installation, but I printed them all out. And I called this project Screen to Screen. And then I also, in this studio, actually, I put a bunch of the screens that I had taken apart in the window. And at a certain time, the sun just comes straight through. So these are photographs of the screen, of multiple screens with the sun coming through them. And then me just photographing that. This was like the same exact thing, but like 2 minutes apart as the sun was setting. And then I did this other project where I put another way of sort of exploring what sunlight and screen light could have something to do with each other. I put the screens on a flatbed scanner and took the top off. And when the sun was shining on the scanner, I was scanning the screen. So basically I was making a hybrid scan photogram kind of. And that the scanner was actually, the scanner light and the screen light were meeting in the screen. So these are the images that resulted from that dialogue between scanner light and screen light. I'm sorry, scanner light and sunlight in the materiality of the screen. And I loved that it picked up these kinds of refractions of the light, and that refraction within the screen really illuminated all of the history of the screen. And one of the things that we also have to think about when we're thinking about screens is we're so intimate with our screens, right? Like they're the first thing we look at when we get up in the morning probably, and the last thing we look at when we go to sleep. They're with us all the time. So there's something about the intimacy and the history here and all the flaws and the reason that these screens are all, you know, I did not take apart screens that were working, right? So they have the history of their deflation and defunctness in them. This was an installation at the New York Public Library of all of these. And then I also started working with the modularity of the screen. I really do love this idea that this kind of modernist invention, the screen, when it breaks, it reflects a kind of modernist aesthetic. And so all of the modularity of the insides of the screen here come together to hold it together. And the entire installation is very precarious because I wanted this kind of precarity around, you know, like the viewer really navigating a physical object that is precarious, actually. And so here we have the bezels of the screen and the interior is holding up. There's magnets inside, they're all holding up. And they're sitting on top of screen boxes from TV boxes. This is a little video, I hope it'll play. It'll just, one of the other things about this work and is very evident in the work at Total Screen exhibition is the animating quality of these screens. It's not going to play, or it will eventually, but as you move through it, different things, like you can see here in the still, that this image is being refracted out onto that image. Oh. And then I did this, let's see, you can skip that and you can see this. Oh, here it is, okay. So the screen itself kind of has this way of sort of ricocheting out an image from, so that's Yeah. And this was an installation where I pulled the screen apart, and these high school students just got so into it, like they were like jumping around and taking pictures of each other. This was an installation at Brick where I actually, it's in Brooklyn. I installed 42 broken LCD TVs and live streamed the news to them. And I also had a, so this was a live performance of these broken TVs. And then behind it, this is the installation. Behind it, you can see here, I had this big table and I invited people to come and take apart screens and devices. And as they got taken apart, I would like put different elements throughout the space. So this is what I ended up with from the TVs that we took apart. And then I also added some things that I already had. And this is what it looked like most days, because there was a school close by, so a lot of high school students came. The reason I'm showing you this, though, is that I'm really interested in this idea of the black box and turning these devices that we're so intimate with, that we hardly understand as material objects, turning them inside out, getting a sense of what is inside them. So this actually became, I took a camera and it live streamed to YouTube, and you could watch it. You could watch people taking things apart if you knew about it. You can see here, there's one person was watching and there are no followers, so no subscribers. So this was at the beginning, so. And then I encouraged people to lay things out, and you could take a picture of the stuff. So I called this a knolling table. It's after, forget who it was that coined that term, but it's in reference to Knoll, the design company. And I also took my favorite parts of these and made these very stark silhouetted images of them, and made temporary tattoos. Oops. I don't know what's going on here. Why is it not? It's being very, very slow, and here we are. Here are the temporary tattoos. I tried to put one on, but I did these a couple of years ago. Temporary tattoos do not last very long. But what I liked about these tattoos is it's about taking something that's inside your device, your iPhone, and putting it on the exterior of your skin. So again, a kind of interior, exterior, inside out relationship to black boxes. And then this is a project where I put a CRT television inside a flat screen TV. So I always think, I call it pirouette for CRT, and it's a bunch of CRT televisions that I found on Craigslist for sale, and I sequenced them in various positions so that they could turn. A pirouette is like a swan song. It's like the last dying dance. But I always think of this also as the LCD TV is pregnant with its precursor, because it's got this like volumetric thing going around in it, but it's a very flat, thin surface. And then another insertion of the TV in the TV is the piece that I have at Total ECRAN. And so one of the things that I was interested in here was, first of all, the video. And maybe I will, can you see my entire screen here? Okay, so I'm going to play you this video. So it's, I think I said 113 images, I can't remember, are in this of broken LCD TVs. And I sequenced them very slowly together. What I wanted to do was, out of the multiple images, to create this kind of singular modernist kind of video. But I also, I'm interested in this phenomenon that sometimes it feels as though the image itself is moving, like things move across the screen. sometimes it feels as though your eyes may be playing tricks on you. So it was really about sort of the perception of the screen and how sometimes, you know, we get these kind of after effects that are in our eyes and it's not the screen. And so to confuse our physical perception of it with what it actually is. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. So that is playing very slowly on this monitor. And as you move around, you see that it kind of disappears. Yeah. So that's the idea, was to sort of, was to create this kind of shift, this kind of shift between the technology that's presenting the image and the image itself and the screen, and how it's very, you know, like sometimes you don't see the image itself becomes precarious. Yeah. So I will end there. Stop sharing screen.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Penelope, for this wonderful presentation, an extended version of what we were able to see when we opened the show, when you showed us some of these projects, but this is a much more expanded version. So it's really nice. Thank you for this generosity in showing so many projects tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity to show the projects.
Yeah. It gives more context also to the piece that's in the exhibition and that Amandine talked about a bit more at length before you showed us your projects. Just so the audience is aware, we'll be taking some questions. So perhaps you want to start thinking about, or you probably already have questions to ask Penelope, but perhaps if you have questions, you can write them in the chat box and not raise your hand, because then it changes the sequence of screens and it messes things up a little bit. But before we take questions from the audience, I do have a few questions that I would like to ask you. I won't ask probably them all or too many, as to give you enough time to answer, and also to give the chance to people in the audience to ask for more questions. But I would like to ask you a couple questions in terms of to gear sort of the conversation towards materiality. You talked about materiality a little bit more towards the end, and I'm not sure if chronologically the later projects you showed in your presentations are the closest to us in time. But this question of materiality seems to take an important place in your work, and then the piece that's in the exhibition for sure is probably, it seems to me, perhaps the most three-dimensional piece perhaps that you've made. I might be wrong, you can tell me if that's so, but so I'm sort of curious about this paradox between speaking of images and screen and absence and, you know, sort of ghost-like figures, and the physical presence which your piece and the show confronts us with. So there's always this sort of conversation between things that are not real yet you print on screens, you throw ink to print images of screens. So there's this paradox really in between the two, and you choose different mediums to express this paradox. Sometimes it's photos, sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's a real physical thing. And I was just curious, really, this is just to satisfy my curiosity, how you go about choosing the presence of the image. So are there some images that are more, let's say, are closer to one medium than others, or are some mediums more perhaps able to show the presence of a certain set of images? And so I'm in terms of process, I'm kind of curious as how you decide what kind of level of presence you choose to give the different images.
It's a really good question, because I mean, I've done quite a bit of thought about this, but I also, it's like there's so much, well, okay, it's, it's one of those things where I'll be working with something and the logic of the image itself, the logic of the subject will kind of dictate what it should be. So the 4x6 snapshots of those disappearing figures in the sunset portraits, when I first started that project, how people had images were 4x6 snapshots, right? So it made sense to actually materialize them that way. The first prints that I made of the broken LCD TVs, I decided I could make them as sort of standard conventional C prints because they had this kind of modernist quality. I wanted them to be kind of big modernist photographs. And then at some point, the idea of e-waste and how, that the project that I did at Brick was the second actually e-waste kind of project that I did. But the idea of the material that's obsolete and that we're like filling our landfills with like how many, like, I don't know, 90,000 tons of e-waste every day or something. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's a lot. And so, questioning, well, maybe use this stuff rather than print on new stuff. So the materiality of the television itself and sort of trying to understand its physical presence in my life became a way of thinking about, well, okay, first I have to navigate the thing. First we have to actually wrestle with it. Actually, the television as a subject, like how many of you have had a CRT television, one of those big ones, sitting in the basement for months because it's too heavy to haul out onto the street, or, what do you do with it? It's poisonous. So there's something so physically awkward and cumbersome about these technologies, especially the older ones. And when I had started making that work, I remember I realized a big influence was this book, As I Lay Dying by Faulkner. And I really think there's a kind of good connection between that and this work, in a sense where I read it so long ago, but there's this kind of, the grandmother who's about to die is watching her son build her casket. And it's told from all these different points of views in the family. And then she dies and they put her in the casket, and then they drive across country in the middle of the summer with a body in the back of the station wagon, and it starts to stink and swelter. It's just the most disgusting, imaginable kind of context. And I think of these technologies that we are so engaged in, and they've entangled us in this way, in this very profound way. And so the materiality of it is always present. Like it wouldn't be interesting to me to, focus on something that doesn't have that kind of layer. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but
yeah, it's perfect. But it also brings me to a question in regards to your piece in the exhibition, again with this, where we're confronted with the layers of the LCD screen, which we never get to see, and we don't even think that there might be several layers to this thing. It seems like just one object. But this exhibition is well, it's unusual for many reasons. One of which is that we put the exhibition thinking that no one would see it. So that was already something a bit strange to think about, how you put together a show that no one will ever get to lay foot in. But for you, I think especially is also unusual, since you've never seen our gallery. And you will not be able to travel to Montreal to see the show before we dismantle it. Yet you still chose to to create a new piece for this show. And so you created a very physical, three-dimensional work for an exhibition that only exists for you in images, a place that only exists through descriptions and images. And so I was wondering if how you think about this, again, this paradox again, where the idea of building or a three-dimensional installation for a space that only exists through images, and that now that your piece is installed, you also only can see your piece in the space through images.
Right.
And so there's like this kind of Russian doll of images and physicality that really becomes kind of complicated in a way. So I don't know what you think about this situation.
Yeah, it's interesting also because that the video that I made is a very slow changing video. And I realized, halfway through the exhibition that to show it as a documentation, it has to be faster because the documentation is like a split second of something rather than 15 minutes of something or 30 minutes of something. So, so I've actually made so many versions of that video now that are for various ways of showing the piece, but not the piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny because I have started, like, for the last few years, I've been making digital mock-ups of sculptural installations, or, installations not particularly like yours, but I've actually I work always on the screen, and I've made digital mock-ups of flat installations, and then sculptural installations I've started to work through. And one of the things that I've learned is that, flat is different than sculptural, and you never really know what it's going to be like. And so the original piece that we were thinking about when I realized there's no way I could be there to help install it, and it's just such a complicated piece, and then it would really not translate well in documentation. So that's when I thought, okay, well, if you're, I guess for me, all of my work is site specific, and so since the site changed, I really wanted to change it. But I haven't, like every show that I've been in since the pandemic, I haven't seen. So it's really sad.
It is really sad. It's sad, but then it's kind of a happy, it's kind of happy that shows do still happen. So
yes.
there's an upside to it. But I'm glad to hear you say this, because it kind of linked to this question I was wondering about, whether there can be a real connection between images and broken images of screens and all this, and in a situated physical place, and this sort of dialectic between the actual real world and the world of these things that we see without really looking at. And
it's really, it's such a great, your ideas about how to, almost separate the virtual aspect of the exhibition and the exhibition itself is like so perfect for this subject, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really great. Thank you so much, Penelope. Maybe I haven't looked at the chat box, and I think that for those of you who are looking on YouTube, you can also write down questions, and we might be able to relay them to Penelope. So I haven't had a chance. I was so captivated by your presentation and answers that I haven't looked at the chat box yet. So I don't know if perhaps someone who's on Zoom with us who would like to ask a question to Penelope would like to open their mic and ask a question.
There's a question here that says, oh, sorry.
Oh. No, go ahead.
Well, it sort of is related to the question that you asked, Louise, and that is how important is the act of, it was Louis Charles Lasnier.
Louis Charles, a colleague here at the...
How important is the act of exhibiting the work in a gallery exhibition space? you know, and I think it's kind of relevant to what, oh, I guess, Carol, you were asking, relevant to that question, and that is that it's really important because it's just an artistic process thing where if you don't have an audience, the work just never gets tested, right? And so there's an element of testing that's really, really important. And even knowing that it will have an audience, but not actually being able to see it, actually still functions as a test. Yeah. So
have you considered making exhibition, online exhibitions, like where, you know, for the past year, museums and galleries have tried to figure out how to have online exhibitions? Is this something you could consider as a type of exhibition, to have it online?
I think it's so strange that online exhibitions take the form of actual sort of in real life exhibition spaces. And it seems so ridiculous to me. It's like, there is no floor online, right? There's no ceiling. There's no limit to the size of the wall that you could have online. So, you know, I find the whole sort of online exhibition thing. So I've made two different projects, one with the TVs from Craigslist, where I've just compiled all of them that I've ever downloaded. So it's a file with I think there's like 3,000 something images in it, and it's huge. So when you see the entire thing on your screen, they're tiny, tiny, tiny little images, but you can actually zoom in. So as you zoom in, you know, the piece becomes kind of like a cosmos. And you can zoom into all the different, like I showed you all a few of the pieces that had a lot of really interesting detail in them. So you can zoom into them this way, and then you can zoom back out, and it's sort of like magic going in and out. And it could never, ever be realized in real life, right? Because it would be like 500 feet tall by 800 feet long, you know, I don't know, and you wouldn't be able to get up there to see the details in the ones that were on the top. It's definitely a screen-based piece. Yeah, and then I'm doing another project on SketchUp, which is I haven't finished it yet, but it would be definitely just a screen work. Yeah.
Well, it'd be amazing to see this 800 feet long image somewhere.
You can see it actually. It's yeah. I think I have it on my website. I'm not sure, but it takes a really long time to load. Yeah.
If I may just take a few seconds, you mentioned, Penelope, that you unfortunately haven't been able to see the exhibitions or the art pieces that you've produced, and there's some comments in the chat, and I have to say, during your talk, I did receive some text and email also of people who have seen the exhibition at the Design Center, and the comments are really unanimous about the impact of your work, and it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. What I find remarkable also personally about your work is how it invites us and forces us in a way to take into account this materiality of the screens, and it forces us to almost take a step back from these screens that we've been staring at for months and months.
Yeah.
And your ability to reveal some kind of beauty through the broken or through the disregarded. And that I find very, very moving. And I just want to say thank you for the beauty of your work. I see that Lisa is asking a question. Would you like to formulate it? Turn on your camera and join us. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, sure, I can. Hi, Louise, and thank you, Penelope. Really beautiful work. so I was struck while you were talking, I was very struck by the work, but also noticing, like, while you're speaking, there's the reflection in the eyeglasses while you're speaking. So there's this additional mediation. Yeah. I get that as well. But then it made me think about, what might we bring back to our thinking about face-to-face encounters and the experience, the so-called unmediated experience. I was thinking that even like the pupils of our eyes catch those reflections. And I know that in ancient Greece, Empedocles talked about the film of the pupil of our eye as a kind of screen.
Right.
So I'm just curious,
interesting. Yeah,
resonates, or what you bring back to the face-to-face encounters after the total screen, or is that part of the process?
Sorry, what was the last part of the question?
Is that even part of your process? It might be something I'm projecting onto it, but what do you bring back to the face-to-face encounter?
What do I bring back to the what?
To the face-to-face encounter.
Oh, sorry. I have this weird air conditioning system. I've actually blocked it off because it gets so cold in here, and it's so loud in here I can hardly hear anything. I'm having to really concentrate. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things, I mean, this is going to sound really off the wall compared, like, in relation to what you're asking, speaking about. But a lot of the work that I have done in the last 20 years, I think, has also sort of, been thinking about the web itself as being, when we're online, interacting with people or sort of communicating, we're having this kind of parallel relationship with each other. And actually Zoom is the first one where the first, since COVID, we've actually been confronted with ourselves in a way that we have never been. Like, I can see myself right now talking. It's like, oh my God, this is what I look like. So there's this kind of confrontation, like you're all there facing me, right? So that's a really different experience. It's like, in some ways, more face-to-face than we were before COVID, when we were online. And I think that there's an element of, people said that postmodernism was a schizophrenic cultural time. And I sort of think of post-internet as being a kind of autistic time where we're kind of not ever really looking at each other. We don't have this kind of, and so maybe we're moving into that kind of place, right? Where we don't have physical intimacy with most of the people that we know. Like, there are people that I've met in the last year and a half that I feel really close to. I've had really great conversations to, but I've actually never physically met them. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think it's really interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It opens up some really interesting questions.
There's a few things I wanted to share.
Can you speak up a little, because it's really...
yes, air conditioning alert. I'm gonna yell.
Okay.
No, there's a few things. I love your work. I'm very moved by it, inspired by it. I think it brings up really remarkable questions of our time, of now, and of course an incredible conversation with what Baudrillard was hinting at. And others. I was thinking of Baudrillard and Bataille, this kind of conversation between Georges Bataille and Baudrillard across decades, of course. But anyway, there were three things that I wanted to say really, really short. One, of course, the question of, have you seen the show? Have you seen your show? It's a really great question. If you've Zoomed with somebody, have you seen them? It's the same question of have you seen your show? And it's the question that it's implicit in what your work is asking. I love the sunlight, screen light conversation, because I think you're in that. In addition, I mean, obviously the materiality work you're doing, but the sunlight, screen light, positions the enigma of the cave of our time. You know, I mean, you know, we're still in the caves. It's just
In the cave, right, right.
You know? And I both mean, I mean Plato, but I also mean the cave drawings. I mean, you know, it's all the enigmas of Plato and the cave, but it's also like, what is it to, what's the deep relationship between us looking at the screen or surface of a cave? And I mean, you know, 100,000 years ago, you know, we know that whoever made those drawings, you know, a friend of mine, Tom Zimmer, great philosopher of these questions, he said to me one day, what if those drawings weren't made by our ancestors, but by bears?
By what?
By bears. And it's such an interesting thing. It's the humor in it is that we have this innate understanding that whoever made them, we consider them us. You know, like, you know, they're human. And the reason we do that is important. It's because we recognize that drawing, surface, image, representation, all of that is so innately linked to our being. You know, the nature of human nature is inseparable from that. So that's why it's funny to imagine bears making those drawings. So one, I wanted to say, I think that the caves, like the caves of our time, I mean, in 50,000 years, we are obviously, you know, in the caves now. The other thing I wanted to share, and
what's interesting about what you're saying actually is, I don't know that anything that we're making now will last that long.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's also that, yeah.
Oh God, I mean, I don't think we could even project out 10 years or 50 years and imagine the complex geographies that, you know, will be, or people will be inhabiting, the human condition will be inhabiting. I mean, 100 years is kind of mind-boggling to imagine forward. But, you know, of course, time, I mean, that's the part of the enigma there, is the relational nature of temporality. So that, you know, in the caves, drawings were drawn over 5,000 years, you know, and now, you know, entire civilizations happened in 1,000 years, you know. But to the materiality thing, I have to say something about Philo Farnsworth.
But what?
Philo Farnsworth. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of Philo Farnsworth, but it's impossible not to mention him given your work and what you just shared. Philo is a completely unique figure. Philo Farnsworth invented the television, and the ones that you were sharing before, pre-flat screen digital TV, right? The
tube television. Mm-hmm.
1920s. And what I love about this story, I'm going to do the shortest, like 35-second version of Philo I can. He was a mathematical genius, and he was a farmer, and he was a child genius, essentially, child mathematical savant. But he never went to school. He was a farmer. And one of the great challenges in making, you know, the early attempts at making the television, there was a serious challenge, which was that the electrical impulse, the strength of it, necessary to create an image that could be transmitted. The way they were doing it, it had to be so strong so that it could communicate, that it would basically explode whatever they made at the other end. You know, like it would blow up the tube, it would blow up the screen. Like there was no way for it to land without destroying where it was landing. Now, Philo had spent his young life in the fields, tilling the land, you know, like cutting rows for planting on a farm, you know, so to the end of one row and back again, you know, from the song. And he was about 15 or 16, you know, because there was like a community college math professor had heard about this kid on the farm that like had this insane math capacity. So went out there and started visiting him and working with him, and they became friends, and like that was, you know, how this. So at 15 or 16, Philo had an epiphany about breaking the electrical signal of the light waves into rows
Oh,
go across
nice.
the screen back and forth and recreate the equation, right? The image. And so he could reduce the, you know, the little power of each moment of little milliseconds. He called it the image dissector. He would dissect the image into little bits, and it worked. I mean, mathematically, the electrical impulses now were not blowing up the tubes. And that's how TVs worked until the flat screen. It's kind of incredible. So what I'm saying is the horizontal geography, the caves, right? The horizontal geography that he had lived in and all that embodied experience, the materiality of it all, you know, became the vertical geography that we live in now. It just like rotated to the vertical.
That's great. That's really quite beautiful to think about it. Yeah.
And I think you're in there. I mean, you're between the caves and Philo. You know what I mean? Like that history is what you're excavating.
I'm playing with it.
Yeah.
It is brilliant as Philo.
And the last thing is just a one sentence quote from John Haydock, who was my mentor and a great figure. Just one sentence that I heard fragments of about 5 times during this, so I have to share it. He said, "There is the possibility of an architecture that could be understood as a fabrication. As it is constructed, it disappears." Right? I mean, it's so insanely beautiful.
Nice.
David, on this wonderful, beautiful metaphor of the great master, John Haydock, I would like to thank you again most sincerely for making this encounter, this meeting possible with all these wonderful friends and colleagues. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to our guest, Penelope. An immense thank you to the team of curators who have done an amazing work in imagining, developing, producing this exhibition at the Design Center. For those of you who might be in this area, it's still on until Sunday. So if you have a chance, please come and visit. I am not objective, of course, but I think it's a very, very beautiful exhibition and stimulating at the highest degree intellectually and for all sorts of reasons from every point of view. So thank you all for being here tonight and for sharing with us this this project. Thank you, Penelope. And
thank you so much for having me.
We have to find a way to bring you to Montreal eventually and meet in person. And I hope we all get a chance to meet you as well in one way or another.
I hope so too.
So thank you again.
Meet David in New York. Are you in New York?
Absolutely. Yeah. I live on Union Square. I've been at Brick many times. I did a couple things out there. I was happy to hear that.
All right. So we'll get to meet anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Great to see you all. Thank you, everybody, so much.
Yeah, thank you. Can you send me the text, the chat, somebody?
Oh, absolutely. Christine.
Yes, there will be a follow-up email, and Penelope, I'll make sure that you get that. That will include links, and you will also be able to get a transcript. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all, and thank you for making this exhibition so accessible to those of us who couldn't be there in person. Good night.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
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 And thanks again, Penelope.
Thank you, guys. It was really fun. Great to meet David and see all you guys again. Gals, actually.
Thank you. Good night.